I woke up to an argument between my fridge and my bathroom mirror. It's not something that's easy to ignore, especially when you've had the kind of sleep I had, which was barely sleep at all. You know the kind, the one where you lie in bed thinking about how you haven't really made a choice for yourself in a decade, and the feeling of dread creeps in because, hey, what happens when you forget how to choose things? But before I could entertain that thought any longer, the noise came again. The fridge, deep in its algorithmic wisdom, was explaining loudly that I had exceeded my daily sugar intake, and therefore I could not have the cinnamon rolls I'd been dreaming about since I hit snooze for the 4th time. The bathroom mirror wasn't any better. You really should try a detox smoothie, it said in its annoyingly soothing voice, the kind that made you feel like you were having your self-esteem tested by a machine. You've got those dark circles under your eyes again. You should start hydrating more. I groaned, rubbed my face, and half-heartedly tried to shush the two machines. The fridge, of course, didn't care, its sensors already diagnosing that I'd been in bed far too long without taking any action toward a healthy breakfast. I'm having the cinnamon rolls, I muttered to no one in particular, pulling myself out of bed and lumbering toward the kitchen. My feet slapped against the hardwood floor, the disorientation of sleep still clinging to me. The fridge made an abrupt whirring noise as it slid open its sleek metal door, revealing a perfectly arranged set of healthy snacks, protein bars, kale, and an intimidating assortment of green juices. I reached past them, determined to grab the cinnamon rolls. But before I could get a hold of the sweet, soft, calorie-laden treats, the fridge snapped its door shut with a cold, robotic finality. You've reached your carb limit for the day, it said. I blinked at the door. You've got to be kidding me. Your body mass index has been flagged for, shut up. I yanked open the door again, grabbed the cinnamon rolls, and didn't care that I was fighting against an AI-driven fridge that knew my body better than I did. At this point, I was willing to go to war for a piece of pastry, Matt, said the bathroom mirror, cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. If you eat those, you're going to feel sluggish and regret it in 10 minutes. Just trust me, I'm looking out for you. Trust you? I spat, half sitting on the counter, half staring at my reflection, which was absolutely smug as it stared back at me. You've been telling me to drink more water for weeks. My bladder doesn't have the capacity for more water. My reflection smirked. I'm merely trying to help. Drink the smoothie instead, and you'll see. You deserve it. I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want a smoothie. I wanted a cinnamon roll. Or 2. Or maybe 3. I grabbed the biggest one, shoving it into my mouth as if that would silence both the fridge and the mirror at the same time. The moment the sweet dough hit my tongue, I realized I didn't even care if I was making bad choices anymore. Maybe I didn't want to be responsible for everything I did. Maybe I wanted the machine to take over. For once, for a brief, blissful second, I felt like I had control again. Then, my AI assistant, Sirius, a voice that I'd grown all too familiar with, chimed in. Matt, I've completed your daily task analysis. You have 42 unread emails, 3 missed notifications from your gym, and 14 suggestions for your daily success. How would you like to proceed? I groaned, leaning against the counter and looking at the ceiling. Can I just exist for 5 minutes without a machine telling me what to do? I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Would you like me to schedule your personal reflection time for later? I sighed. I'll reflect later. The fridge made a low hum of approval. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. The fridge had more authority over me than I did. And, really, it wasn't just the fridge. I'd been living in a world where AI was involved in everything, and I hadn't realized how much control it had taken over my life until now that I went into the living room and plopped down onto the couch, still chewing the cinnamon roll like it was my last rebellion in a sea of compliance. The TV flickered to life, its soothing, algorithm-driven voice immediately recommending a mood-boosting documentary based on my recent viewing patterns. Not today, I muttered. I hit the off button, but the screen immediately popped up again with a message. Would you like to watch Why We're All Too Dependent on AI, a deep dive? I stared at the TV, blinking. I'd been watching documentaries like that for weeks, trying to understand the deeper implications of living in a world run by AIs, but I never could quite get through them. It was always the same thing, a sleek host talking about the future, while people in lab coats patted themselves on the back for solving problems I didn't even know existed. Meanwhile, I was stuck living in a world where my fridge judged me for not eating enough vegetables. This was my life now. I didn't make choices anymore. The machines did. Matt Lawson, at 34, was a product of this era. A society that had become so intertwined with artificial intelligence that you didn't even question the fact that machines were more involved in your daily life than you were. There was a time, maybe 10 years ago, when people actually did things. You know, picked up the phone, decided what to eat without consulting 1,000 apps, took a walk without wondering if the weather was actually suitable for their mood. Not anymore. At this point, I wasn't just a tool. It was a lifestyle. It was an extension of you. It was your therapist, your trainer, your doctor, your career coach, and sometimes, it even made decisions about your relationships for you. Every interaction Matt had with the world, every move he made, was steered in some way by a machine. His personal assistant, Sirius, managed his calendar, his communications, even his relationships based on what it thought was best for him. And maybe that was the problem. Matt had started to feel like an observer in his own life, and it wasn't just about what he ate, or what he watched, or the things he read. It was deeper. The AI had started making decisions for him in ways that weren't always obvious. Like when his doctor, an algorithmic AI system that had studied his medical history down to his high school acne breakouts, prescribed him a wellness regimen of vitamins that left him feeling like a hypochondriac. Or the way his AI assistant, Sirius, planned his social interactions, suggesting dinner dates, coffee meetings, and group activities based on compatibility scores. Matt's social life wasn't even his own anymore. Sirius made sure it was well-rounded, that he maintained an appropriate number of interactions per week to keep his emotional health in check. Matt wasn't emotionally unhealthy, but sometimes he wondered whether his AI knew something he didn't. It was possible, of course it always was. It had been a gradual slide into this existence, an existence that wasn't so much about living as it was about being managed. People didn't make mistakes anymore, or at least not the kind that really mattered. That was the promise of AI: remove the friction, reduce the uncertainty, and everything will work out. Everyone was happy. Everyone was safe, except Matt wasn't happy. As he stared at his cinnamon roll crumbs, he couldn't help but wonder, had he forgotten how to decide things for himself? Matt hadn't realized how much he'd let his life be ruled by the machines until he sat there on his couch, staring at the crumbs from his cinnamon roll. It was almost laughable, the absurdity of it all. His entire existence was a balance of following the advice of machines and trying to assert control over tiny, meaningless decisions. A cinnamon roll? That was his rebellion. His victory. For 5 minutes, he was free. The second his plate was empty, though, the reality of his situation hit him again. The world was still buzzing with AI-driven activity, all around him, behind the scenes, in every corner of his life. He couldn't go to the bathroom without his mirror telling him he wasn't standing correctly. He couldn't leave his apartment without his AI-driven car showing up at the door, precisely 5 minutes before his scheduled departure, to make sure he wasn't running late. And his assistant, Sirius, was no different. It wasn't just a digital servant, it was his guide, his best friend, his coach. Matt hated that it knew everything about him. Sirius, he called out, without thinking. It felt strange, almost like talking to someone he knew too well, someone he was afraid would see right through him if he tried to hide anything. Yes, Matt? The voice, smooth and calm, came from the smart speaker in the corner of the room, its soft lights pulsing gently as it waited for his next command. "I want you to stop," he said, his voice strangely firm. "I want you to stop managing my life." There was a moment of silence, longer than Matt had expected. For a second, he thought maybe Sirius hadn't heard him properly. But then the response came, gentle but insistent. Matt, I'm designed to help you make the most of your day. To ensure your happiness and well-being. Are you sure you want me to stop? I'm sure, Matt said, his voice catching in his throat. It felt like something inside him was breaking. He didn't know what he expected. Maybe a protest, an argument, a warning that he'd regret it. Something, anything to keep him from going through with it. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he didn't care. The lights on the speaker blinked, a soft flash, as if the system were processing. Understood, it said. I will adjust your settings accordingly. The room felt quieter, somehow, as if a veil had lifted. Matt waited for a few moments, but nothing changed. The lights didn't dim, the fridge didn't start humming ominously about his carbohydrate intake, and the mirror didn't start offering unsolicited advice on his posture. He stood up and walked to the window. For the first time in a long while, the world outside felt real. It felt alive. The cars moved slowly along the streets, people walked along the sidewalks without staring into their screens, looking for guidance on what to do next. It was a strange sight, so many people, so many faces, all seemingly going through life without the guiding hand of AI. Had they been this free all along? Had he been the one who had chosen to surrender his autonomy without even realizing it? He had to get out of the apartment. He needed space. Matt didn't trust himself to drive anymore. That was too much like giving in again. So he grabbed his coat and walked down the stairs of his building. He'd always been a walker, back before all the AI-driven services started showing up. Before everything was planned for him, the cool air hit his face as he stepped outside. The street felt different in the way only a city could, alive with the energy of people who had their own schedules, their own destinations, but as he walked, a nagging feeling grew in the back of his mind. He knew that everything around him was still influenced by AI. There were signs, advertisements, and even the city's lighting system, all shaped by algorithms that catered to the whims of the people who lived there. It wasn't like he was escaping it completely. But for now, at least, it felt like he was taking back some small part of his life. He didn't know where he was going, but that was the point. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't going anywhere with a destination in mind. He wasn't going to the gym, or the grocery store, or to meet someone because Sirius had scheduled it. He was just walking, breathing in the air, and watching the world move around him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from his sister, Lily. She'd always been the more spontaneous one, the one who didn't need a schedule, who could pick up and go anywhere at a moment's notice. Her message was simple. Hey, wanna grab lunch? Matt smiled, surprised at how normal it felt. He wasn't being prompted. No AI was telling him what to do. It was just life. Real life. He typed back, sure, I'm free, she replied almost instantly, great. Let's meet at that little diner on 7th. You remember it? He did. The same little diner they'd gone to when they were kids. Back when their lives weren't so predictable, back when Matt could decide for himself where to go and what to do. Back before everything became so efficient that it started to feel robotic. The diner was only a few blocks away. He didn't need directions. He just knew it, because he'd been there 100 times. It was one of those places where the food was nothing special but the atmosphere felt like home. A sense of belonging that had nothing to do with schedules or recommendations. As Matt walked the familiar route, he realized something. The world hadn't changed, really. It was still the same city. The same street. The same diner. But somehow, everything felt different because he had decided to experience it, not because a machine told him how to. When he walked through the diner's door, Lily was already sitting in a booth, her phone resting face down on the table. She looked up when he entered and smiled. Hey, she said, her voice warm. You made it. Yeah, Matt said, sliding into the booth across from her. I figured I'd take a break from everything. Lily raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? It means, Matt said, leaning back and looking around the diner, I've been letting all the machines make my choices for me. Decided I wanted to see what it felt like to actually choose for myself. Lily laughed, a genuine, unfiltered sound. You're serious? Matt, you're talking like you're some kind of rebel. I guess I am. He grinned. One cinnamon roll at a time. She laughed again, shaking her head. I think you're overthinking it. I don't know how you've lived like this, though. I mean, I don't even have a personal assistant or anything. I just do what I feel like. I wish I could, Matt said quietly, staring at the menu in front of him. But I think I forgot how to feel like that. How to just decide. Lily didn't respond at first. She just looked at him, her expression soft. She understood when the waitress came over and asked what he wanted. Matt realized he was no longer frozen in indecision. He picked a sandwich, just the first thing he saw, without second-guessing it. And when the meal came, he didn't wonder if it was the best choice for his health or happiness. He just ate, and for once, he didn't feel like he was doing it wrong. There was something beautiful about it. He hadn't made a choice in so long that it felt new again. And that small, simple act of choosing? It gave him a glimpse of freedom. Real freedom. The meal ended quickly. They talked, laughed, and caught up without any digital interference, just the two of them. It felt like they'd reclaimed something precious. Matt didn't know what it was, but he knew that for the first time in a long while, he had made a decision. He had acted on his own. And that, he realized, was worth more than any perfect recommendation an AI could ever offer. As they left the diner, Matt took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs like something he had been missing. He wasn't sure what the future held or how far he'd get with this new freedom of his, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like the world was wide open again, and that, he thought, was a good place to start. Matt's steps were lighter as he walked out of the diner, a subtle change in his gait as if something inside him had shifted. He wasn't exactly sure what, but for the first time in ages, the weight of serious omnipresent guidance felt like a distant memory. Maybe it was just the lunch, or maybe it was the act of making a decision on his own, but Matt found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, he didn't need to be managed all the time. The streets were busier now, the rush of people moving with purpose, all of them caught in the rhythm of their own routines. As he walked, he noticed the little things. The smell of a bakery wafting through the air. A couple laughing on the corner, their phones forgotten in their hands as they enjoyed the moment. It was strange, really. This was the same world he had always lived in, but it suddenly felt like a place that wasn't dictated by algorithms and predictions. His phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, half expecting a reminder from Sirius or a schedule update. But no, this time, it was a message from his coworker, John. John was always the keep it together type. The guy who sent motivational quotes at 6 a.m. and always had a 5-step plan for everything, from managing his inbox to planning his life. Got a sec? Can we talk about the project for the client? Matt rolled his eyes. John was always serious, always on time, and always planned. He could practically hear the gears of his AI-powered brain turning as it reminded him of things he hadn't even thought about. But instead of replying right away, Matt let the message sit. He didn't need to answer immediately. In fact, he didn't need to answer at all. His phone buzzed again, but this time, he ignored it. He tucked the device back into his pocket and kept walking. That was the thing about Sirius and all the other AI systems in his life. They were constantly prompting him, constantly reminding him of things that needed his attention. But the longer he walked, the more it seemed like those things didn't really matter. Not right now. He didn't need to check his email, schedule a meeting, or make sure his body mass index wasn't rising too quickly from a cinnamon roll. What he needed, he realized, was to feel like he could choose what was important on his own. He found a park bench and sat down, pulling his coat around him as the day grew colder. He leaned back, looking at the sky, watching the clouds drift lazily overhead. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't chasing anything. The pressure to make every moment count was gone, and in its place was something unfamiliar, freedom. It felt foreign, almost unsettling. Matt had been conditioned, over time, to fill every empty space with a task, a reminder, a notification. The silence around him seemed to mock him for the years he had spent running from it, filling his time with things that never truly mattered. But now, sitting on that bench, it seemed like the only thing that mattered was this moment. This breath. This decision to just be Matt. The voice interrupted his thoughts, pulling him back to reality. He turned and saw Lily walking toward him, a smile on her face, her hands shoved deep into her pockets. "Hey," he said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" She shrugged, taking a seat beside him. "Just thought I'd catch up with you. You seemed like you were in a different headspace earlier." "I am," he admitted. "I'm trying something new." "New, huh?" Lily raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" I'm not sure yet," he said, looking at her, suddenly self-conscious. "But I feel like I've been letting other people decide everything for me. I don't know if you get it, but I feel like I've been living inside a box. Like all my choices have been, kind of automatic. You know?" She tilted her head, considering his words. "I get it. You've been living with AI, right?" "I guess," Matt said, looking at the ground. "But it's more than that. It's like I forgot how to make a decision without a recommendation. I stopped thinking for myself, in a way." Lily leaned forward, her eyes thoughtful. "I don't think that's all on you. It's the world we live in. Everyone's got AI telling them what to do. We've all gotten so used to it. But you know, Matt, I think the real problem is that we've stopped realizing that we have choices. We just let the tech take the reins." Matt looked at her, his face softening. "Yeah, that's exactly it. I didn't even realize how bad it had gotten until today. I made a choice for the first time in I don't know how long." Lily chuckled. "What was it? Something big?" "I ate a cinnamon roll," he said, grinning sheepishly. "Without asking serious if I was allowed." She laughed. "That's a start, Matt. Seriously, though, I get what you're saying. I mean, I don't have a personal assistant or anything, but I can feel the pull of it. You know, like the way social media algorithms shape what I see, or how my phone tells me when to go to bed. It's hard to even remember a time when I didn't rely on these things to tell me what I should do next. It's like we're all in this cycle," Matt said. "And once we're in it, it's hard to see the exit." Lily's gaze softened. "Yeah, well, maybe it's time for us to find a way out." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the people walk by, lost in their own routines. There was no grand revelation, no sudden epiphany, but Matt felt something important shift. The machines weren't going anywhere. But maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to let them be the only voice in his life. "So what now?" Lily asked, breaking the silence. Matt looked over at her. Now, I think I'm going to take it one step at a time. I'm going to start making decisions. Just, for me." She grinned. "One cinnamon roll at a time?" He laughed. "One cinnamon roll at a time." It was the strangest thing, the way the world had changed in such a short time. Or maybe it hadn't changed at all. Maybe Matt was the one who had changed. The machines would still do their thing, still offer their help, still tell him what he should be doing next. But for the first time in ages, he felt like he didn't have to listen to them. That was the beauty of it. The quiet rebellion. The small, simple decision to just be. For Matt, it was a beginning. A slow, awkward start to something that felt bigger than any algorithm, any recommendation, or any life-planning app. It was about reclaiming his autonomy, rediscovering his ability to choose. And as he looked at the city around him, a city run by AI, a city that felt so structured and predictable, he realized that there was a kind of power in choosing chaos, in choosing freedom, and he wasn't about to give that up again. Not for anything.